Okay, so I stumbled across this video posted by a white woman who is apparently from Barbados. So for the duration of this video, she will be known as Becky the Bajan, okay? So let me show y'all the video that she posted.
Yo, Shaggy. Yo, cuz. Family. Yo, unruly. I me say family. Sure. If I want thing, me hate a fern killer. Me no believe in a fern killer.
So in this video, Becky the Bajan states that she is from the Caribbean and she now lives in the United States. And she has issues making friends with other Caribbeans because whenever she goes to a Caribbean event in the United States, people look at her like, what is you doing here, Becky? I mean, that's a very fair question, right? But then she goes on to shade those Caribbean Americans and she says, oh, you know, they're looking at me like I don't fit in when the whole time they've never even been to one of those Caribbean countries and they think Tabasco is spicy. First of all, girl, the only person you talk about with that Tabasco comment is cave folk. Like, what black person think Tabasco is spicy? But that's not even the point. That's not even the point, okay? Let me get into what the point is. Now, my black Americans, hold up. Because I hear y'all commenting. Y'all finna come comment and be like, this ain't got nothing to do with FBA, so who cares? First of all, clearly, if I made a video about it, I must care. Like, first and foremost, lady. But then second of all, actually, this does have something to do with FBAs. And I'm going to tell you exactly what. We've all heard of apartheid in South Africa, and we all have some understanding of, you know, white South Africans, okay? In fact, I've made like 2 videos about them. I'll put the links up here if I can remember the title of them, right? But I'm bringing this up for a reason. Whenever somebody tells white South Africans they're not African, their immediate response is about African Americans. We all the way on the other side of the world minding our business, but for some reason we always getting brought up, right? So these white South Africans will say, well, I'm actually born and raised in Africa, you know, and you telling me that I can't call myself African, but those African Americans have never been to Africa and they call themselves African Americans. So what's up with that? Have you noticed that this directly parallels what Becky the Bajan said about Caribbean Americans? Okay, now let me go further into this. This is my thing. I tell y'all straight up, I'm not African. Culturally or ethnically, I am not African. When you think about African American culture versus African culture, they really not similar at all. You know, it's sad to say, but it's been 400 years of no contact. So we've vastly grown apart. And like I said, it's so sad because that was the goal of white people during transatlantic slavery. And they did succeed there, right? But this is my thing. Even though I'm not culturally or ethnically African, quite clearly I am genetically African. Like if you look at me quite clearly, like, you know, there's a blood tie to Africa there. Now, explain to me, what tie do white South Africans have to Africa aside from colonialism? Now, let's extend this to Becky the Bajan. What tie does Becky the Bajan have to Barbados aside from colonialism and slavery? Like, who is this to Barbados besides the child of enslavers? It makes no sense, right? And now this raises a question for white people, period. Because this is not just about Becky the Bajan or white South Africans or whoever. This is about white people, period. How dare you use any group of black people as some sort of scapegoat to defend why you feel entitled to something? Because that's what this boils down to, white entitlement. This reminds me of the stories that I hear like whitewashed African Americans tell. So they'll talk about how they were raised in the suburbs and, you know, they were whitewashed. And then there will be a white person who's a wigger, for lack of a better terms, and say they listen to rap music or something more than that African American person. They'll say something like, oh yeah, I'm blacker than you are. How can you be blacker than me? It don't matter how whitewashed I am. It don't matter how far I am from home. You will never be more me than I am. I don't care where you from, what you into. That's just not how it works, my friend. My main question is, what gives white people the audacity to even make these comparisons? Because it's bad enough with the white South Africans using African Americans as a scapegoat. Because at least, okay, you know, like, we've never been to Africa. Our parents ain't African, yada, yada, yada. That's bad enough. That's bad enough, right? But how is Bajan Becky gonna come for Caribbeans whose parents are Caribbean? Like, literally, they're culturally Caribbean. They just happen to live in America, right? It's bad enough with the white South Africans, but then Bajan Becky took it even a step further. And again, the question is, who gave you the audacity? Who gave you the audacity? Who do you think you are to sit there and say that you more blank than an actual blank person? What? But again, it comes back to that white sense of entitlement. You think that you the best and the brightest at everything that you do, and you better at whatever than the actual whatever people. In fact, this makes me think about something that I was thinking about earlier today. I was like, how can anybody say that Eminem is like the greatest rapper? Because anybody who's ever listened to a rap song ever knows that Eminem is not top 10, probably not even top 20, if I'm being honest with you, right? I was like, how can anybody say this? But then that brought up this concept of white mediocrity. White people are the best at everything, even if they're not, right? And I remember a comment somebody left under my YouTube. They were like, yeah, Eminem is not the greatest rapper ever, but he's the greatest white rapper ever. And I said, wow, it's crazy because there's such a huge gap between the two. By white rapper standards, oh, Eminem is the god. Give him his #1 trophy, right? But by black rapper standards, he's not even in the running at all, remotely, even on his best day, literally not top 20. But because he's a mediocre white man, he gets to be considered the best. Nobody gets to compare. He's always #1. That's how white people work with their handouts, right? So just because Bajan Becky happens to be a white broad from the Caribbean, she thinks that she's the best at it and she could try to undermine somebody else just because she's white. Like, how dare you? Who gave you the sense of entitlement? It just makes no sense to me. I have one last thing to comment on. So in Becky the Bajan's video, she said, oh, when folks assume that you're a typical white chick, but you were actually raised in the Caribbean, yada, yada, yada. And I want to know, what is a typical white chick? What does that mean? Because it sounds like she's saying that a white chick who grew up within her actual culture is a typical white chick. Is that there's something basic or less than about that? Have you all ever noticed that white people use blackness as a social currency almost? Like, you'll notice that white people use their proximity to blackness as some sort of like a come up. Ooh, look at me. I'm so cool. I'm so special. That's literally what she's doing here.